A Lutheran pastor always started each service by saying, "The Lord be with you." The people would respond, "And also with you." But one Sunday, the audio system wasn't working. So the first thing he said was, "There's something wrong with this microphone." The people responded, "And also with you." That's true of us pastors. There is something wrong with us. In my case, lots of things. It's true of all of us. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Jesus is the Good Shepherd who has come to bring us home. Our gospel reading says, when Jesus arrived and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. Then he began to teach them many things. That verse reveals a great deal about Jesus. He was worn out. He and his disciples needed some time away. They didn't even have time to eat because the crowd was always pressing in against them. The people were always wanting them to do something for them. So they decided they would go on a vacation, get away. And Jesus had picked out a deserted place for them to go. But when they pulled up to the shore, it was like a cruise ship had just unloaded thousands of people. They were there waiting for him. How would you have reacted? Being filled with compassion is probably not how I would have reacted. Maybe disappointed I could not relax on vacation, or exasperated that I could not have some downtime, maybe even angry that I was not getting a break, or perhaps feeling sorry for myself that the work never ends. A pastor friend of mine likes to go on cruises. She never reveals her occupation to other passengers. Why? She says she made that mistake on her first cruise. She said from the first day on, when people found out she was a pastor, they were coming to her expecting her to listen to their problems, to offer them comfort or advice, to pray with them. And because she's a good pastor, she did that. She could not turn them away. She spent the whole cruise engaged in pastoral counseling. She said that cruise was not a vacation. So now when she goes on a cruise, she does not tell anyone that she's a pastor. When Jesus looked at the huge crowd waiting for him, he did not get back in the boat and sail away. No, Jesus had compassion on the crowd. Why? Because they were like sheep without a shepherd. What does that mean? The phrase sheep without a shepherd was an ancient expression in Jesus' day. It occurs 4 times in the Hebrew Bible. For example, God told Moses that he was going to die and would not be able to lead the people into the promised land. Then Moses asked for God to appoint a leader after he died so that the people would not be like sheep without a shepherd, leaderless. The prophet Micaiah warned King Ahab that if he went to war against Syria, he would be killed in battle and his troops would be scattered like sheep without a shepherd. But the king did not listen, and Micaiah's prophecy was accurate. Kings were called shepherds in the ancient Near East long before the Bible was written. We have references to kings and shepherds from ancient Babylon to ancient Egypt more than 1,000 years before Moses lived. There's a statue of Pharaoh Ramses II holding a shepherd's crook. A shepherd's crook was a symbol of the king. Even though shepherds were near the bottom of society and kings were at the top, shepherd was a good metaphor for a king. Why? Because the king was supposed to protect his people and to provide for them, just as a shepherd protected his sheep from wild animals and led them to water and pasture. The people of Galilee did not have a king, but they did have a ruler. Herod Antipas was tetrarch of Galilee. And he happened to be visiting Jerusalem when Jesus was on trial before Pilate. When Pilate was interrogating Jesus, his accusers mentioned that Jesus was from Galilee. So Pilate sent Jesus to Herod Antipas for him to be tried by Herod. Herod questioned Jesus at length, but Jesus refused to answer. Then, along with his soldiers, Herod mocked Jesus. He put an elegant robe on him and sent him back to Pilate. I wonder if Jesus did not say anything because Herod had executed his cousin John the Baptist. Jesus knew the horrible story that is told a few verses earlier in our chapter in Mark. Herod Antipas had ordered the arrest of John. He had John shackled and sent to prison at the nagging of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. Why? John the Baptist had provoked Herod by calling his relationship with Herodias adultery. Herodias, smoldering with hate, wanted to kill him, but didn't dare because Herod was in awe of John. An opportunity arrived when Herod threw a birthday party, inviting all the military leaders and elites in Galilee. Herodias' daughter, Salome, entered the banquet hall and danced for the guests. She dazzled Herod and the rest. The king said to Salome, "Ask me anything. I'll give you anything you want." No doubt drunk, Herod got carried away. He kept on, "I swear I'll split my kingdom with you if you say so." She went back to her mother and said, "What should I ask for?" "Ask for the head of John the Baptist," Herodias said. Excited, she ran back to the tetrarch and said, "I want the head of John the Baptist served up on a platter, and I want it now." That sobered Herod up, but unwilling to lose face with his guests, he caved in and let her have her wish. The tetrarch sent the executioner off to the prison with orders to bring back John's head, which he did. When Jesus heard this, he grieved over the loss of his cousin. And so as he stood trial before the tetrarch Herod, he would not give him the satisfaction of an answer. The story of John's execution is horrible, but it shows what kind of shepherd was ruling Galilee in Jesus' day. A man who would kill a righteous prophet to save face over a drunken promise to his stepdaughter after her erotic dance. A man who ridiculed the King of Kings when he stood silent before him. No wonder the people of Galilee were like sheep without a shepherd. Throughout the Hebrew Bible, the prophets took aim at the corruption and evil of the kings of Israel and Judah. For example, Ezekiel rebuked the kings of Israel. This is what the sovereign Lord says, "Woe to you, shepherds of Israel, who only take care of yourselves. Should not shepherds take care of the flock? You eat the curds, clothe yourselves with the wool, and slaughter the choice animals, but you do not take care of the flock. You have not strengthened the weak, or healed the sick, or bound up the injured. You have not brought back the strays, or searched for the lost. You have ruled them harshly and brutally. So they were scattered because there was no shepherd, and when they were scattered, they became food for all the wild animals. My sheep wandered over all the mountains and on every hill. They were scattered over the whole earth, and no one searched or looked for them." So God threatened to punish the leaders for their selfishness in taking advantage of the people instead of caring for them. Israel's shepherds remind me of the story of the British tourist group visiting Palestine. Their British guide was describing some of the customs of the Near East. He said, "Now you're used to seeing the shepherds following sheep through the English lanes and countryside. In the Middle East, things are different. The shepherd always leads the way, going before the flock, and the sheep always follow him. They know his voice." About that time, the bus stopped at their destination. The first sight to greet them was a small flock of sheep being driven, not led, by a man. The guide was astonished. Immediately he called to the shepherd, How is it that you're driving the sheep? I've always been told that the shepherds in Palestine lead the sheep." "You're correct," replied the man. "The shepherd does lead his sheep. But you see, I'm not the shepherd, I'm the butcher." Israel's kings, like some modern leaders, were more like butchers than shepherds. God offers a solution in Ezekiel's prophecy. The Lord said, "I will rescue my flock. I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. As a shepherd looks after his scattered flock when he is with them, so I will look after my sheep. I will rescue them from all the places where they were scattered on a day of clouds and darkness. I will bring them out from the nations and gather them from the countries, and I will bring them into their own land. I will pasture them. I will tend them in a good pasture. There they will lie down in good grazing land, and there they will feed in rich pasture on the mountains of Israel. I myself will tend my sheep and they will lie down. I will search for the lost and bring back the strays. I will bind up the injured and strengthen the weak. I will shepherd the flock with justice. From the early days of Israel, before Saul became the first king, the ideal was that God would rule over Israel, a theocracy. But Israel insisted on having a human king. Rulers are not worse people than the rest of us. Some give in to temptations to do immoral and corrupt things because they can. They take advantage of the people because no one can stop them. But God's concern is for the people. God loves the flock. So when Jesus stepped out of the boat, the Lord had compassion for his leaderless people. The crowd surrounded him, wanting him to heal their sick, to bless their children, to unite the people against Rome, to drive out the Roman army, to dethrone Herod Antipas, and to step up to be their king. His response to their being shepherdless was immediately to take on the role of their shepherd. How? Not by arming them, but by teaching them many things. What did he teach them? He taught them that he was the good shepherd who cared about them. He told them he loved them and would lay down his life for them, that he came not only to heal them physically, but also spiritually. He talked about God's grace and forgiveness, mercy and love. He challenged them to love and forgive each other, including their enemies. He called for them to follow him as their shepherd and to be willing to lay down their lives for him. Like them, we do not always follow our shepherd. We go astray. We're all broken and in need of spiritual healing. We're all famished for what we do not even know. In the depths of our beings, there's a longing, a God-shaped vacuum that only the Lord can fill, even though we try to fill it with many other things. I like the story of a man who came home drunk after a night of carousing in several neighborhood bars. His wife helped him up to the bedroom, helped him undress. He tucked him into bed. Then she knelt at his bedside and said, "John, do you want me to pray for you?" He nodded, yes. And she began to pray. "Dear Lord, I pray for my husband who lies here before you drunk." He interrupted, "Don't tell him I'm drunk, just tell him I'm sick." We can come clean and admit our mistakes because our shepherd accepts us as we are, loves us despite our faults and shortcomings, and helps us overcome them. The good news is that Jesus, who laid down his life for us, has come to be our shepherd. The Reverend Dr. Al Lindgren was a Methodist minister and professor at Garrett Evangelical Seminary. He told about taking his junior high son fishing. It was one of those days when the fish wouldn't bite and the two of them had lots of time to talk. Out of the blue, his son asked, "Dad, what is the toughest thing God ever tried to do?" Al said that the question caught him off guard. He didn't know what to say. So, like a good teacher, he answered a question with a question. "What do you think it was, son?" His son responded, "Even though you're a pastor, you don't know much about God, do you, Dad?" He then proceeded to answer his own question. "Since taking science in school, I thought the creation of the world might be the hardest thing God ever tried to do. In Sunday school, we got talking about some of the miracles, like Jesus' resurrection, and I thought that might be the toughest thing that God ever did. Then after thinking some more and talking to others, I've decided that no one really knows God well. So now I think the toughest thing God ever tried to do is to get us to understand who he is and that he loves us. Al simply responded, "Son, I think you're right." And that is why Jesus, God incarnate, came to us. Jesus revealed God's love and mercy, who God really is, a God of compassion and steadfast love, a good shepherd to the people. And when we go astray, the Lord leaves the rest of the flock and comes to look for us. He rescues us when we are caught up in the thickets of our own making or when others have shackled us. He lifts us gently out of our messes. He places us around his neck and carries us back home like a little lamb, back home where he takes care of us. Amen.